Uh, Good evening. Today is February 18th, 2026. This is a meeting of the Land Use Committee. I'll ask everybody to introduce themselves. My name is Jay Rosepepe, City Council member.
Hi, Shira Dedman, City Council.
Nick Bond, Community Development Director.
Jim Fisk, Principal Planner.
Sure, if you don't have any issues, I was a previous chair. We can't elect a chair until we have all of our members here. Would it be okay if I just ran the meeting? If not, yeah, you can take it. Okay. We have a published agenda. Is there any additions to the agenda as published? Okay. So the first one was elected chair. We will postpone that until our next meeting. The next agenda item is time restrictions on EV parking in specific areas. Go ahead, Jim.
I think I'm taking this one actually, and I'm going to just share my screen. Um, I've got a very simple question, and I'm seeking guidance from the Land Use Committee. I don't know that this needs to go to the full council for discussion, if you guys are in agreement here. But this power pole at Givens Park is in the parking lot here on Art Michelson Way, and we have had PSE has installed EV chargers on this pole. And the question that we have is whether we want to establish time restrictions on these parking spaces so that they're limited to 4 hours, or whether we want people to be able to park for extended periods of time in this location. Currently, this lot has no parking time restrictions, and in our other EV charging stations that the city controls, it's a 4 hour restriction on how long you can park there. I'm uh, I'm happy either way. I was just seeking some input. It is up to the city engineer to erect any signs concerning time limitations, and so we're just looking for some feedback on whether we think we need them here or not.
I guess my personal opinion is we've been doing 4 hours for EV. I usually see EV chargers having time restrictions on them for parking. This is probably unique because, as you said, we don't have any time restrictions for parking anywhere else. But I feel that if we're trying to make a benefit of the EV, that 4 hours would be appropriate.
And I should have noted too, these are level two chargers, and so they can take up to 8 hours to fully charge a vehicle. So if somebody does live in the neighborhood and they want to fully charge their car, they need more than 4 hours to do that. If they're just topping off, then 4 hours is enough, and you're encouraging turnover.
Hmm.
Are they paying for that?
They are. It's PSE is running the program, and so it's you scan the charger. There's a sign with a QR code that you scan. If you once you hit your payment information, it lowers the cable to you so that you can plug it in. The power pole or the EV charger is actually way up high on the pole where it can't be tampered with, and so once you pay, it lowers the cable, and then you plug into your vehicle.
Um,
Not sure.
yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if we're really allowed to have a decision without the third person here, but
It,
for
it
me, I'm all for having it might be nice. Well, it might be nice to have the restrictions because even if right now they aren't enforced, if they need to be enforced, they will be there in place.
All right. So both of you sound like you're in favor of a 4 hour sign being erected in this location. Perhaps we can just, during your committee report, I assume Jay, you will make that on Tuesday. Maybe you can just verify that on Art Mickelson, just let the council know that that the land use committee has advised this, and then staff's going to follow through and implement it.
Yeah, and I'll add the caveat that we don't have any other restrictions up there, and about that. I understand what you're saying about that there's slow trickle, on that. On the other hand, without any, I don't want to, people camping there either. It's more like letting additional people be able to use it because you can always slow trickle out of your house also. Uh,
I also have one other question about that too. You mentioned that most, is there anywhere else where they have one of these without any kind of um, time limits? Or is
Not as far as a city facility.
Yeah.
I don't know, the ones at Fred Meyer are private, and I don't know if they have time restrictions. Usually the chargers have like an idle fee. So if your car is full and you leave it sitting there, they charge you per minute that you're there until you move your car. I don't believe the PSC polls do that. So but actually maybe they do. I should look into that and confirm.
Yeah, could you find out? That'd be nice to know.
Yeah. And I suppose the other thing about the 4 hour restriction is that we only have parking enforcement at the city for 8.5 hours a day. So if we have if we don't have a parking restriction, there can be zero enforcement. At least they have to turn over once a day while parking enforcement is there if you have a 4 hour sign. And
Yeah,
if
I just
overnight somebody can park there all night and they're not going to get a ticket because there's no parking enforcement at night.
yeah, I understand that, Nick, and sure, you might want to weigh in on this one. I'm just looking for turnover during the day to allow other people to use because we don't have. It's not like we have a lot of EV chargers around the city yet. So, okay, I'll bring it up and see what happens.
Sorry, I agree. It was on audio. I agree.
Cool. All right. Item 3, POMC on landscaping.
Okay, we're reviewing proposed updates to our landscape standards in Chapter 20.128. The goal is to clarify the code, align with new regulations, and support neighborhood connectivity, environmental performance, and diverse housing types while keeping the process predictable. Some of the changes you'll see in your red line include a new purpose statement focused on visual and pedestrian connectivity, expanded applicability to all residential and non-residential development, clear rules for amending landscape plans, stronger invasive species control, and modernized buffer and fence standards. One big policy question is, should middle housing follow the same landscaping rules as detached homes? House Bill 1110 requires equal treatment of middle housing and detached houses. So the draft, which you have, applies standards to all residential development. We'd like the land use committee's feedback on that approach. As you heard last night at a work study, Public Works is mapping the city's tree canopy, which will guide future tree planting requirements. However, their work and any established city-wide tree canopy goals warrant consideration into these updates to ensure implementation. For now, we've not touched those regulations. They remain untouched and are not redlined. So we're aiming for adoption of these updates in early fall 2026 with more review and public input along the way. And happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Sure.
Yeah, so I did have a question because it seemed like, in looking at some of the language, like especially middle housing, where our code seems to be coming with the language, with the amendments, it seems to be becoming more vague rather than more clarifying. Like it went from saying 3 or more units to this generic middle housing, unless that's being defined somewhere else. I wasn't seeing that being defined. And so I really worry if the code is becoming more vague, that's not really going to help people follow
Sure.
the code.
No, so as part of our middle housing updates, in 2012, we incorporated a lot of definitions. And so the intent of just describing it as middle housing is so that you can rely on the definition that is in 20.12. So it essentially, middle housing is anything more than a single family unit, a detached house. So it's a duplex through all the plexes through a sixplex. And then once you get to 7 units, that becomes an apartment building type.
Okay, so you're saying those were actually already defined and you're trying to make it in alignment with those definitions. I think generally when that happens, that is capitalized. So middle housing would be capitalized to refer to it being written somewhere else and defined, as opposed to lower caps.
Yeah, we'll take that under advisement.
Jim, could you go back for a second and talk about were you looking for input on this, or is it
Well, it's really a policy.
well, hang on,
Okay, sorry.
no, it was about the middle housing being equal detached.
Yeah, and it's really a policy decision, right? So currently, we do not apply our landscape code to single family residential, but we do apply it to those middle housing types. And so under House Bill 1110, we are required to treat them the same. So essentially, the question is, do we not want to require landscaping for middle housing like we don't for detached houses? Or do we want to now pull in detached houses into these standards?
I guess what would be the impact, and I'm going to show my ignorance here, what would be the impact on builders?
Well, if you're building a single family house, you're now going to have to put together a landscaping plan potentially.
Okay, so that'd be possibly a cost upper.
Well, we've also included in recognition of that, that there could be some caveats to not requiring a licensed landscape architect to prepare the plan, that it could actually be done by, me or you to create that plan in an effort to reduce that cost.
Right.
What happens in a subdivision? I mean, when a builder is building, do they just do that because they want their property marketable? Or is it a requirement of the subdivision for ground cover and trees and all of those things?
It is not required of a subdivision plat. The only landscaping that is required as part of a plat are the street trees, which comes out of the public works standard,
Mm-hmm.
and any required recreation space, whether that be passive or active, those two have to be landscaped. But front yards, currently, there's no requirement in municipal code to landscape them.
So the builders do it to for
Right.
marketability.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay,
That's
sorry.
an
I just want to kind of summarize what we're talking about again, just to make sure I'm wrapping my head around it. Right now, you're saying that the code, this is for future builds, not existing housing, or is it for future builds only? Like, I think, yeah, if you can clarify that. And then you're saying that the policy question is whether that should apply to essentially all housing types.
Correct.
Okay.
So
Can you explain that a little bit more? Thanks.
yeah, so the second part is correct. That's the question. Do we want to apply it to all housing types? But this would only impact new development activity applications, right? So it's not going to impact the house that's already built, but rather if you apply for a permit, then we apply these standards to that review.
And so as written already in the code and just applying that out. Okay. And then my next question was what you had pulled up. Sorry, let me, you had pulled up, okay, I'm going to shut up while I find out what I don't navigate all these windows well, quickly, I should say.
Me either.
So basically, we're looking for guidance right now to about which way to go as we continue to move forward in our update of code.
Right. And so we've posed this question to the Planning Commission.
Mhm.
I think we introduced it I think it was actually November that we first introduced landscaping. And then we provided a red line that you have in your packet to them
Right.
at the February meeting and posed the same question. We've not really received any feedback from the Planning Commission on that specific topic.
Can I ask you a question too? Can you help explain this language where it is it states right before what we're talking about, the applicability and the compliance, it says promote landscape designs that maintain visual and pedestrian connections between adjacent properties. Can you explain a little bit more about what that impact would be? So are you saying you're building a new, let's say, single family home? And so now this also is saying that it has to look like the person next door to you. What does that mean a little bit? Can you explain that?
Well, that purpose statement really is intended. Our current code, you'll find a table in there, and it says you're going to have either A, B, or C type landscaping. It gives a width, and then it also goes on to say and fence or path or path. In many cases, a fence is required, and that's not always desirable. So if you think about was the Gravity Coffee on Bethel, it's fairly new there, in between Bay and Mile Hill. It's on the east side of the street there. You'll notice that there is a cedar fence that kind of surrounds the property. There's really no purpose for that. And so what that fence does is it prevents people from walking from one property to another. There's no ability to create a cow path or anything like that. And so it cuts off all of these developments from one another. So the intent really is to reduce that, maybe a low hedge or something, some alternative to that. But we've not fully defined what would be required as far as single family at this point.
Okay.
But yeah, the intent is not to say every house is going to look the same, but that there is some variety there.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for explaining that to me. And yeah, I've driven over there because I was like, I don't know why I can't think of this fence. And now I'm looking at it. That's funny. Thank you for the visuals.
And I'm just going to offer some commentary on the requirement in this new piece of legislation that was passed. I'm personally looking at doing a project at my house right now, and what I have found is that Tacoma, where I live, they had to make this same decision. Are we going to make it easier to build middle housing or harder to build single family housing? And they chose to make it harder to build single family housing, which means that as part of me adding on to my house, I have to submit a landscape plan. I could be required to submit a lighting plan, except I've chosen not to include pathways along the side of my house. But if you provide a pathway along the side of your house, you could be required to provide a lighting plan. And the reason for that is that when you have 6 units on a property, they want to have these things, but under the law, they can't require it for projects with 6 or between 2 and 6 units unless it's also required for the single family house. So it really is a choice that we have to make is, are we going to make it easier and have lesser standards for middle housing, or are we going to have higher standards for single family housing so that we're treating all these housing types the same?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Thank you. That's what I was really trying to understand. Thanks for clarifying that. Obviously, I never want to make that harder. I don't want to make it more expensive. I don't want to make that harder. That's my take.
At this point, I would concur, since we don't have this is one where I'd love for Scott to be here. So I would like to move this to, I know it's not a decision that needs to be made today, so I'd just soon be able to move an update on this to next month also. You good with that, Shara?
Sorry, yes,
Yeah, cool.
absolutely.
No impact, is there, Nick or Jim?
No, in fact, I don't even think that we are going to discuss it at the next planning commission because we're still waiting on Public Works and their tree canopy work before we can really do anything else. But we can certainly bring back what the commission is saying as part of their recommendation.
Just real quickly, this is a short session, so if there's anything that's on our agenda that there may be a bill coming through right now that you know of, please let us know. Just also, okay. All right, fourth item is another PO.
Jay, there's not one bill. It's
No, I understand that. I'm just saying, is if there's one that's like, a major one that we need to know, anything about.
there's all kinds of bad bills.
Just wait till they come out then. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. All right.
Who knows what's gonna pass? There's another week left, and
Yep.
we'll see what happens. Shelley's been emailing Nick and I and to provide feedback on numerous bills throughout the session here.
Cool. Hardly wait. Next one is POMC on multi-plat processing.
Okay, so tonight we're introducing proposed amendments to chapters 20.22, 20.80, and 20.90 to update how the city reviews and approves final plats. The goal is to align with state law and create an administrative pathway for approval. Currently, final plats require a public hearing and council action, even though all improvements have already been completed and reviewed under the preliminary plat and land disturbing activity permit. At this stage, the question is simply whether the conditions have been met, so adding another hearing adds redundancy and uncertainty. State law allows cities to delegate final plat approval to staff or a commission, and because approval is ministerial, once requirements are satisfied, a hearing isn't required. Staff recommends shifting to an administrative approval model for efficiency and predictability. The red line draft included in your packet has not yet been provided to the Planning Commission. Plan to bring this to them next month, followed by a public hearing and a recommendation to City Council. So we'd like your feedback on these proposed amendments and taking that kind of action that would shift the approval process from council to staff.
So basically, the way I read it is, and it was not in depth, is this would improve the timeline for approval and speed up part of the process.
It
Absolutely.
could.
Yeah, I would say, our big challenge with this process is that we don't bring any final plats to the city council unless they are ready to be approved. And so the only way it gets on your agenda is if staff is recommending approval. And if staff's recommending approval, council is essentially obligated to approve it. And so you don't have a lot of choice if they've met the criteria unless you just disagree with what staff has recommended, which has not occurred in my 20-year career. I would say the other big challenge is that you guys meet twice a month where you can approve these, and we have packet deadlines. And so we will have our developers scrambling, trying to get things done and get inspections conducted, trying to meet a council schedule because, for those rare times when we go 3 weeks without meeting, when there's a fifth Tuesday, they can miss out on closing deals. Or they're proposing to bond improvements that if we had 5 more days, they could have that work finished. And so I think taking this out of the rigid schedule of council meetings and putting it into an administrative process just makes it so that we can have fewer bonds and work at the pace of the developer. And when the developer actually has completed everything, we can go ahead and approve it rather than having to wait for it to go to council.
Could I also add that state law requires action to be taken within 30 days of filing an application. So while this hasn't happened here that I know of, if a developer refuses to or does not agree to waive that 30-day decision timeline, that could force staff into taking things to the city council with a denial recommendation if it's not ready for approval.
No, I would concur with this because it speeds the process up. I've certainly seen when we don't meet, like in August, where we only have one meeting, we could run into issues. I guess my only case would be, I would assume that we would have notification like we always do about, plat approval, so we can kind of see where the growth in our city is occurring.
Are y'all saying plat?
Plat, P-L-A-T.
And what does PLAT stand for?
Just kind of stands for itself. It's what you call the document that is recorded with the county auditor that actually creates lots. So when somebody subdivides their property into, 1, 2, 3, whatever it is, more than one, that document that gets recorded, that's called the plat. And that's
Okay,
what
got
actually
you.
creates
And you're
the
saying
cost.
normally to have that finalized, that has to go through city council.
Our code is currently written that it's a type 4 application that requires a public hearing. The the issue is that they've already done everything they've been required to do, so it's redundant and
Okay.
yeah.
Is this, do most areas around us, do most cities forego the public hearing?
Yeah, they really do. And so I included some guidance from MRSC in the packet, so you can go look at some other model ordinances. But I spoke with my counterpart at Bremerton. They've gone to an administrative process. City of Bonnie Lake is also administrative. Most jurisdictions are.
Um,
Our
is there a way, and so without that public hearing, how does the public find out about it?
Well, there's several steps in creating a subdivision, but they all come with some sort of notice. So the first one, when they file a preliminary plat application, that's just saying this is how we want to divide it. Generally, this is what it's going to look like. There is a notice of application that goes out. There's typically a SEPA determination that's made. There's a notice of a public hearing where people can participate there. The hearing examiner then issues a decision with a list of conditions of what they're to do. And so that's what gives the developer some certainty going forward in the process. So from there, they submit, after they have that approval, they submit for a land disturbing activity permit, which is essentially showing their work, right? Are the pipes the right depth, the right size, et cetera, et cetera. There is a notice of application that goes out with that. And so there's a comment period associated with that. There's a decision issued, there's an appeal process associated with that. But as far as the final plat, at that point, there's no need for another public hearing because then you're essentially introducing the potential to move the goalposts on the development.
Yes, okay, I understand now. Thanks.
Yeah, the hearing exam at the beginning of the process is when the hearing examiner ruled that it was lawful to build the subdivision. Now the developer has put the pipes in the ground, put the street lights up, created all the lots, and now we have this approval that the city council at the end of the process that the city council really can't deny, otherwise we would get sued because the hearing examiner deemed that it was lawful to build all this infrastructure and create the lots. So
So they build it before they get final approval, is what we were saying?
yes. That's-
Hmm.
So that's this. It's just an odd place for an approval because it's already been built. Why
Yeah,
you
that's
couldn't
really
deny
weird.
it?
Yeah. So at what point would, like, for city council to have, let's say so, because clearly, like, it seems to me that the code wants city council to have say so, but then
Well,
if
it
they've
doesn't.
already built it, so how
You
would that
create
work?
the code. So we have a comprehensive plan and we have code that creates zoning and what can be built in zones. And then
Yes, I
with the
noticed that,
the
but
hearing
I noticed
examiner
that
then
they
rules
were,
whether it's lawful or not.
yeah, I noticed that like in the last time we went, there was all this like room for interpretation. And so that's why I was reading that like city council gets the final say so because there's all this room for interpretation. And I guess ideally, the city council is supposed to kind of know better about which way to interpret it for the city. I guess that's why they supposedly made city council the final determinant. So I'm just trying to understand a little bit more about like if the process then becomes administrative, uh, just trying to understand a little bit more where does that say so? Is it just like essentially you're saying, okay, at this point, it's really administrative anyway, so we should just like waive that final determination? Because I agree with you, that final determination makes no sense if they're already building. So I'm just wondering if there's like by code, is there or anywhere in the process where that can actually happen sooner so that they're not building, or is that just not possible in the code at all?
So you've delegated the authority to make the decision on whether the proposal meets the code or doesn't meet the code to the hearing examiner. So they're making the decision on whether the proposal meets the code or not. And then there's a second check-in with this LDAP, like Jim mentioned, where you get to see the final engineering, and somebody could appeal that and say, hey, this isn't consistent with what the hearing examiner approved. But again, that would be a judicial appeal or a hearing examiner appeal of that permit. What the council's role is really just double checking staff's work to verify that we've checked all the boxes and that all the conditions in the hearing examiner decision were in fact met. And so your role is only checking our work to make sure that we've done what we were supposed to. So it's really
So
you're
if
taking
it's open for interpretation,
there
doesn't
really
matter.
isn't interpretation. I mean, it's really did they meet the condition or did they not meet the condition? And if you found that they didn't meet the condition, then you would have a basis for denying a final plat. But that's
Okay.
that really doesn't happen by the time it comes to the city council.
Yeah, especially if they've already been building. I hear you on that one.
Yeah, you would be essentially saying you didn't meet the condition. Go rip up something that you've already
Yeah,
done
that doesn't
and
make sense.
redo it.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost a redundancy, to say the least, on that. I don't have any problem in delegating this to staff, and speeding up the process in some instances, and it's not in our bailiwick. So I'll
Yeah.
stick with policy and financial.
Yeah. I would like to see some kind of like report, ideally at the end of the year, that helps people understand how this benefited the city, moving the process into administrative.
So you'd be looking for would be something to say, these folks applied for final plat, and normally it wouldn't go to the city council till August. They were able to get it done, closed out in July.
Yeah, obviously it's easier if I thought about it a little bit more about what those metrics look like, but I'm just throwing it out that it is definitely helpful when you do things uh to have, to just report back what the difference meant for the city, how we were able to do things quicker, cheaper for the city, whatever. It would be nice to have the report back.
And Jim, maybe what the code ought to say is that after a final plat has been approved, we just provide notice to the city council that the plat was approved.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking in the director's report at the end of council meetings, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I have to remember to do that. If it's in code, a planner will remind me that we need to report that something was approved.
Well, sometimes we get the report, rats from Lisa. That's what I was saying, for when we see the ones for occupancy, that we get, something along the lines, even if it's just a line item. Sometimes the director's report can be kind of not quick, but it can be at the end of a meeting, can be kind of over the head. So it'd be nice to maybe see it in email or at the end of the year. Just think about that. We'll go from there. Anything else, Sharon, on this one? I'll take that as a no.
Yeah, sorry, I put a thumbs up.
Fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
No, I'm good.
I'm looking at a very, very small screen right here.
Yeah, no, I'll try to
No
unmute
problem.
quicker. Thanks.
All right. Permit software.
All right. So I wanted to share with the Land Use Committee a decision that we've made in my department, and eventually this may require some council action in the way of budgetary decisions or um, uh, the possibility of hiring somebody temporarily. But we have been doing some work. We started last summer by doing a lean process improvement exercise, looking at our permit process from application to construction completion and certificate of occupancy. And we've been trying to look for where is the inefficiency, the waste within our process. And out of that exercise, we really identified a lot of bottlenecks that have to do with our permit technology and how we are using the software that we have. And after we completed that exercise, we did an employee survey to ask everyone who is a user of our current permit system what they saw in the system that needed to change and or could be improved upon. and what their level of support for making changes to the system would be. And then in November, we also did the same sort of outreach, but with our development community, asking the people who regularly apply for permits in Port Orchard what features are missing from our technology offerings that would make their life easier. And so Jim and I have been compiling that information, and I met with our leadership team, the deputy director. Our Jim is our principal planner, our planning manager, and our permit center manager. And we have made the decision based on the feedback that's received that we want to continue with SmartGov, but we need to activate features that we're not currently using. And we've heard from applicants that the number one things that they're looking for, two out of the three are definitely within the realm of what we can implement by expanding SmartGov to do things that we're already paying for, we just aren't using. And that is our online payment system. People currently have a difficult time making payments for permits, and I will tell you that our process, we have a financial system and a permit system that don't talk to one another. Our permit system has the ability to take permits and to work with the same credit card vendor that we use for our financial system, but it requires some manual reconciliation at the end of the day if you're to automate things, which that's not a terrible process. It's a once a day thing that you have to do. Our current process, what happens is when somebody applies for a permit online, our permit clerks and techs have to calculate how much is owed by that person and create an invoice in our permit system. That form gets emailed to the finance department, who then duplicates that permit amount in their financial system so that the bill can be paid either online or by somebody walking to the finance department from our department to pay the fee. Once that fee has been paid, they have to bring their receipt back to the planning department or email the receipt back to the planning department so that we can mark it paid in our system. And we're basically redoing a whole lot of work and forcing people to walk between buildings when most cities have a system where you're uploading your plans on a website. The system automatically tells you how much the fee is. You enter your credit card information and you hit pay and you're submitted. And it's a very clean one-step process. So that's one of the top three things that our applicants are asking for. And it's going to take some cooperation between the finance department and DCD. We did budget for this this is already a budgeted expense because we figured regardless of what we do with our software, we're going to have to work on this financial piece. And so we're going to pay our software company to create this online application portal and to set it up so that we can take payments online. It is going to involve the finance department. Instead of handling 10 individual permits a day or 20 individual permits a day, however many might be walked over to their office, instead of doing that as they come in, they're going to have to reconcile things once a day at the end of the day. And if there are discrepancies, there's going to be some work involved in sorting that out. My take on it is that it should be roughly the same amount of work. It's just one big project at the end of the day versus lots of little projects throughout the day where you're trying to get these things processed. So that's the first change that we're looking to implement. And then, like I said, we want to actually make it so that people can apply for their permits directly into our SmartGov system, which is the name of our permit software. Currently, we are using a system called Camino for our online applications. And what happens, Camino is a good tool for novice users because it helps them navigate and make sure that they fill out the right forms. SmartGov does not have that navigator feature. But what's happening is because we're using Camino, they have to upload all their documents to Camino. Our staff is then downloading those and then manually entering them into SmartGov. And so we're doing a ton of data entry in our department. Whereas if people just went to SmartGov directly and uploaded their plans, yes, they have to know which boxes to check in terms of what permits they need. I think 95% of our applicants know what they're after. It's 5% of people who maybe need this additional help. But people are going to be able to directly load their plans into SmartGov. They will get, there's going to be no scanning of documents. There's going to be no file transfers of drag and drop and using our Dropbox for getting these documents into the permit system through email. And so the idea is that we're going to launch the public-facing portal so that people can just apply online, they can pay online, and these documents get automatically input into the system. And then what our permit clerks are doing is once that submittal comes in, they have to assign the work to who's going to be the reviewer, and it automatically transmits those documents through the permit software to the reviewer, rather than what is currently happening, which is these things are getting put onto our server, and we are sending a transmittal letter that says you've been assigned this work. Here's where the file is located. Here's everybody who's involved in the review. And they're only using our permit software to do a final sign off and to add conditions onto a permit. This will actually allow them to view the documents in our permit software, to mark them up in the software, and to do a much more complete review. So this is not a small project. This is going to take at least until the end of the year to implement. We have learned that there's a software specialist who's done work in Bainbridge Island and is currently doing work for Kitsap County, and they're on a contract where they're doing 3 months of temporary work. And I would like to bring this person in to help us get this system running more smoothly because they have a lot more technical expertise than anybody in my department. And our IT department really isn't involved in this software. They can provide some support, but we either are going to have to pay SmartGov to help us configure all these features or find somebody with this expertise. And so I'd like to try to bring somebody in that has this expertise for 3 or 4 months. And if they're not available, then I would probably look to use SmartGov, and they're going to cost a little bit more, and probably give us fewer hours overall of support. So I'm just sharing this information with the Land Use Committee in case you have any concerns with this approach. And I will be asking the full City Council to support this initiative.
I hate that I can't use emojis. I'm saying rad. I feel you. This is a great approach, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're gonna get a lot of backing on this, Nick. I can see a couple of questions coming up. One is the education piece as we make the change. Obviously, it doesn't need to be decided today, but that's a piece of it. And the second piece is still the customer service aspect for the 5% who would have the trouble with the uploading or knowing what to upload on that. I would assume, always a bad thing on my part, that our other DCDs are using SmartGov the way you're moving toward. So that should help a lot with the existing developers and builders. But again, we go back to the 5% and making sure we don't drop them out of sync. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Last comment is my assumption, and again, I might be wrong, but the reason why I like this approach is that if you have a project manager on this, they can create documentation that can then be used to create these kind of guides. If you use SmartGov, you're not gonna, in somebody in-house, you're not gonna get that benefit of that. So that's why I really love this take on it, our plan.
All right. Well, thank you for the support. And we do intend to create guides and videos for how to use this software once it's up and running. I think that's really important for those 5% of applicants, especially new businesses who are coming in with tenant improvement permits. We've already spent a lot of effort on the website just trying to get in front of those people before they start down the path of doing a project, not fully knowing what they're getting into. And so I think the approach that we're taking on our website, hopefully we will know who those people are and can say, hey, we have these resources for you. Please watch this recorded video of how to do this, and this will show you how to fill out your application.
Awesome. Last item before we go for good of the order would be permittable AI. Always an interesting.
Yeah. So I'm sharing this with you because I'm bringing a resolution and a contract to the City Council next Tuesday. We are looking into entering into an agreement with Permittable, and interestingly, the city is not proposing to use Permittable. We were approached by the developers at McCormick Communities who happen to be in the same office park in Kirkland as this company called Permittable AI that is developing an AI plan review solution. And so McCormick has been doing some beta testing with Permittable AI and found that it was catching about 85% of the comments that the city is making in its first round of review. And so they approached the mayor and I and said, "Hey, these guys are willing to to kind of do a trial with Port Orchard if you're interested. We think this can save people a lot of trouble by pre-screening applications before they would come into the city. And so the approach that we plan to take is to enter into an agreement with Permittable, where we're going to share some of our public records data with Permittable. They're going to work to calibrate their system so that it kind of understands the types of comments that we're typically making as we do plan reviews. And they're going to allow for a period of 1 year anybody applying for a permit in Port Orchard to pre-screen their application before they submit it to the city. And so the idea here is that if somebody can spend a few hours, it only takes 5 minutes to create an account and upload your plans to the system. It will generate a report a few hours later that gets emailed to you, and it's going to be a 7 or 8 page report that says we've identified these potential issues with your plans, and it gives them the opportunity to make corrections before they actually apply to the city. So hopefully, when they submit a first review, maybe instead of 3 reviews, they're getting approved in 2 reviews, or maybe they're even getting reviewed the first or approved the first submittal. And so the idea is that this is saving staff time, it's saving the developer time and money by allowing them to kind of get in front of some of these corrections rather than waiting for the city to give them a first comment letter. And so I'm just going to show you what this looks like. I've gone in and created an account on their platform. And so once you have created an account on their website, you're basically dragging your files into this little box to upload. And this, you can have a zip folder that has all your files in there. If the documents aren't flattened, Permittable will flatten them for you as part of their process, although it will be faster if you upload a flattened document. But basically, you're uploading your documents, and then you hit next, and then it says choose which reports you want. Because this is free, they're going to give you all 3 reports for free, and then it's going to run this analysis. Which, when I tested this myself, it took overnight before I had my report, and then I got an email notification that the report is ready, and then I was able to review the report, and it was quite consistent. I did this in my personal capacity for my project that I've applied for here in Tacoma, and I had already received Tacoma's comments, so I just said, why don't I upload my plans and see how they compare? And Tacoma had 2 comments that Permittable didn't catch, and really no other issues that were identified. And so we're going to do some testing after we sign this data sharing agreement. We will test this before we make it available to the public. The idea is that we would have a link to this page on our website. We're going to have all kinds of disclaimers because people are using this at their own risk. This is a third party. It's optional. We want to make sure people are aware that by uploading to Permittable, they're not vesting their permit application to the codes in place. They don't vest until they actually apply to the city. And so if they take the time to do this, they could miss the opportunity to vest because they're making corrections to their plans ahead of time. So our city attorney has all sorts of recommendations for what we need to say on our website, and say we've entered into a pilot program and a partnership with this company. You can use them for free. Please contact our department and we'll give you a code to enter so that you don't get charged for the review. And then people can try it if they want to, and if it works, great. And if it doesn't work, we're not spending a whole lot of time on this. We're really trying to just identify a good sampling of our existing permit reviews so that we can help them calibrate their system for Port Orchard. We're going to test it a few times and make sure that the reports that are being generated are generally accurate. And once we feel comfortable with that, we're going to make it available on our website and share it. So this agreement, it's a lot of legal boilerplate just about public records and data sharing. And so you'll see a very brief and simple agreement with a resolution to create a pilot program and to authorize the mayor to sign a contract with Permittable to share our data.
So, a couple of quick questions. This is a trial period. Should it be successful, and maybe we don't know the answers to this right now, would this be like a parallel path for people being able to enter, and who's the cost to?
So this is available now. So they're still in a beta testing phase right now. They have given access to this to a number of the builders that McCormick is working with, and so those builders are currently able to try this. And so anybody who's beta testing it could pay the fee to have their plans reviewed now. I think after the end of the trial period, this either becomes just an option that is available to somebody if they want to pay the fee to have their plans pre-screened, or if the city found it really useful. We've talked with Permittable about whether there's a possibility that we would want to make this available on like an annual fee sort of thing where anybody who applies in Port Orchard would have access to this. And so I think that's a discussion that we can have after we have some data. And one of the things that we're going to collect on our application forms is we're going to add a checkbox to the application that says, did you pre-screen your plans using Permittable? And did you make changes based on the report that was generated so that we can actually see whether there is a significant improvement in review times based on people using this versus not using this. If it's not actually speeding things up, we probably wouldn't want to pursue any further contract, but we've at least sort of taught people about a tool that's available, and if they choose to use this or a competitor, they can certainly do so.
I'll go with Shara right now and say I wish I had an emoji that I could do a thumbs up. So good.
Oh, and I did want to share, sorry, I was going to share one more screen. I do have just this is a report that was generated. And so what you're going to get is a report. These are the documents that had been uploaded. It gives you a narrative and it says, this is just a high level overview. It's saying that corrections are required. There's some administrative items, architectural clarifications, some energy code stuff that needed to be addressed. And then it provides a matrix under each of those headings. And so under the administrative, it's identifying things like, for instance, the plans they uploaded didn't yet have the wet signature from the architect or engineer. And so it was flagging that issue. Once you get down to there was a note about fire sprinklers and saying that the code requires that you have a fire flow letter. You should probably put this note on your plans. It then identified a window egress issue, and then talked about stair handrail details maybe not being on the plan. And so ideally, the architect would go through this and say, oh, yeah, you know what? I should probably put a note about the stair and handrail on there. And that's just potentially one fewer thing that's going to hang them up in their first round of review. So this report was actually done for an iterative review where they had done 2 cycles of review, and so it talked about how things improved from the first review to the second review. But this plan review took more than 2 reviews to get approved, and this was one that McCormick had run through when they were testing this. That they shared the report with me. So anyway, that's kind of the type of report that gets generated, and I think I'm hoping that this is really helpful. And even if it's not helpful, I think that we are doing something innovative that none of our neighbors are trying right now, and I'm excited to just do everything possible to make sure that things go smoothly for our applicants.
So let me go down a rabbit hole, Nick. You just answered one of the questions that we're trying this when some of our counterparts are not, which is always cool. How do they, or what, I guess various cities, counties have different options on, different things that they need to do to get permits on building. Okay. We know that. And so how do they account for those differences? Are they loading in everybody's code, or is that still, unclear?
They are. So that's part of the calibration process. But the AI system, when I tested this on my own plans, it saw that my address, so it knew where I was. It was able to figure out what my zoning was from available information on the internet. It was able to pull the city's code, and so presumably it's going to find those things. But we're going to do some testing to make sure that it's capturing our local amendments to the building code, because we do have a few subtle differences. But the state building code is the same in all cities except for these local amendments.
Right.
And local amendments really aren't super numerous. So I think it should be able to learn that if it hasn't learned that already. But we're gonna test it.
Okay, cool. Shara, anything else before I go to good of the order?
No, thank you.
Okay. I only had one for good of the order. It just popped in my head. Just an update since this happened last year, and Shara may not be aware of it, is just where we are with the update on Stormwater Park, and that's the next phase of that. I know we've done some neighborhood getting information from them. I was just curious of where we are going down the process with that. I know it's not a tomorrow's item, but I just wanted to ask.
Well, I've seen some preliminary illustrations from Connor, and he is making revisions at this time, and so I'm hopeful that maybe in March we will be notifying the neighborhood that we have information to share. But he's still making these graphics is time consuming, and he's got a lot of permit reviews, so it'll be just a little while longer, but I'm hoping in March we'll have something to share.
Cool. Anything else for the good of the order? Shara, Nick, Jim? It's unanimous. Thank you all very much. Next month, and we'll go from there. Thank you. It's good meeting.
Thank you. Goodbye.